Hi, friends. This is Pastor Eric Crahansel again with Refire, and I am excited that today I have with me Nate Bailey. Nate is from Lime Tree Counseling, located in Ambler, Pennsylvania, and they are a Christian counseling center or facility or place. I'm not sure what you call it exactly, but we're excited that you are here, Nate, and I'm excited that you have agreed to come out and to share. Nate and I had a chance to meet, a couple months ago now, and he reached out to me just to kind of say hello. And we had a chance to chat, and we have a couple of things in common where you are helping to teach at Eastern University, and I was teaching at Eastern University, and we just hit it off and we're talking about lots of things. And then I thought, wow, let's talk about helping people in ministry and helping pastors. And he does some of that. And I invited him to be part of this conversation here as we talk about what it means. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about the simple idea of how to recognize, prevent, and manage burnout. But before we get started, I've asked him to share a little bit more about what they do at Lime Tree. So
yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to get to talk a little bit. It's a great topic, great opportunity to, I think, be aware of the ways in which burnout can impact us and how we see those signs. So Lime Tree Counseling, my wife, Katie Bailey, started at Lime Tree Counseling. She had been working for another private practice, and kind of one thing led to another and decided to go out on her own. It was never the plan that I would be joining full time, but COVID sort of led us to kind of reconsider a number of things, and it just really seemed like the best fit. And we do actually like to work together. Some people have asked that. We're friends. We get along well.
Yeah. Things are okay when you go home.
Things are okay.
Yeah.
And so Lime Tree Counseling has sort of just naturally, organically kind of grown into a group private practice. And so we do work with adults and teenagers. And a lot of our work is focused on things like trauma and recovery, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, addictions, grief, and all kinds of things related to that. It's not always so easy to say it's this or it's this, but we provide what I consider to be sort of, evidence-based modalities in a way that can help people through the lens of our Christian faith. And we love being a part of our community and doing that kind of work. So,
well, thank you for sharing that. Appreciate the insight about Lime Tree and what you folks do. I think it's awesome. And that's why I'm just so glad that you can be part of this, because there is a reality that as we talk about burnout with pastors, I've witnessed it. I think at times I've experienced it. But I kind of wonder too, though, like, what is it we should be looking for? What are some of the signs of that? What is it? I don't know. Maybe you could just share more about what you've seen or how we can be more aware of it as well, as we should be looking for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say, oftentimes when this topic comes up, there's sort of a knowing chuckle by people in the audience, because it's one of these things that many people experience. I think it's really not a question of if, it's just sort of when. And so there's sort of this knowing chuckle because, we sort of know what we should be doing or what's best practice, but then there's the reality. And the reality says, I have all these responsibilities and I'm working well over 40 hours a week, and I have a family and I have all these other things, and, the days go by, the weeks go by, the months go by. So I think the first thing is just to recognize it is likely going to be a factor for basically everybody. And so we have to, once we've sort of accepted that, I think we have a sort of plan for how do we keep that away? How do we manage that? And the answer to that, I think there's a number of different factors, but to answer your question, sort of what are those indicators? I would say there's a couple of them. One would sort of be just sort of losing a bit of a passion for the day-to-day responsibilities or work. Maybe in some ways even starting to feel a little resentful that somebody needs our help or our effort. It could look like just feeling more tired than normal, more days than not. It would look like just, irritability, being a little less patient, a little less tolerant. It could be to the point where it's starting to impact our sleep. It could start to impact our appetite. We could find ourselves distracted easily. Procrastination's often a big sign. I've talked to people and they say, I just can't make myself do this anymore. And yeah, I get it. Like, you've been doing this and you're exhausted. And so I think those would be some of the signs that jump out to me. I think the other factor of this that's so important is to actually acknowledge them and respect those indicators. I think most people tend to recognize some of that stuff, maybe not right away, but eventually. It's that they keep going. And so they go past, it's not like you have a circuit breaker where it pops. You've got to respect that this is a factor and that this is happening, and then manage and deal with that.
So I guess the question is, like, and I know we talked about this earlier, but like, so we've got the indicators, which I wanted people to hear. Like, there's things that they need to think about. Mm-hmm. And you're describing some things I feel at times. I'm just being honest. Like, I'm just like,
well, we all do.
Yeah. You're listening. I'm going, that's me, so here I am. But what do you think? Let's back up inside of it. Like, what contributes to it though? Like what starts that ball rolling, or what starts that I don't know, that point of where you're just like, oh, I can't believe this is all happening. Like, what starts that, you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if our job was chopping wood all day, we would at the end of the day be physically exhausted, and we would know, yeah, that's because I was chopping wood all day. When a job, whether it's in a ministry or, any kind of a helping field, we really draw from our empathy, from our care, from our ability to be connected to other people. That is not an infinite supply. Even if we have a real heart for people, which we should in these kinds of jobs, these are things that we are drawing from in order to connect with people. And that can be depleted over time. And that happens to everybody at certain points. So I think when we look at ministry and some of the unique aspects of that job, some of the factors would be, as I said earlier, and I've been in church settings where we talk about, there's what's on the job description, and then there's office hours, and then there's the reality, and everybody again kind of chuckles. But it's sort of that sense of always being on. I think some pastors and ministry leaders feel like they can't say no if someone's asking or calling. They have to take that call, whether it's 10 o'clock at night and they're, doing something with their family, or they're on a date night with their wife. They've got to take this call, or they have to cancel their own personal things. And so it's that sense of just, there's no boundary there. Right. And so, that can happen in any kind of a busy week. But when you, again, just start week after week after week, I think that's a factor. For some ministry leaders, I think we'd be honest if we said that there's a pride thing of, I can do all of these things.
Yep.
But I don't think it's that simple. I think in other cases, people just really sincerely care about who's asking for help. I think another factor is a lot of ministry leaders feel that they have to be able to provide whatever this person's asking, as opposed to sort of like, determining what's going on and maybe refer to somebody else. And sometimes that's people in the congregation, that there's an expectation that this person's my minister or my pastor, and they should be available to me 24/7.
Yeah, right.
And so I see this becoming more of a factor where there's a church or denomination where maybe the church leaders themselves, the lay elders or whoever's involved, are they looking out for their ministry leaders? Are they allowing and setting boundaries? Are they, creating opportunities to get away and get rest? Or is there, again, sort of this expectation that like, you're there, you're on call, this is what you're going to do. And that's just really I would say a time bomb, because at some point nobody can sustain that type of connectedness.
Yeah. I was thinking of a word as you were talking about this, is this idea of like, it compounds.
Absolutely.
Right. Because, you could start here and then eventually it just starts to roll higher, and it can roll higher. Like the weight of it can just get bigger and bigger if you're not willing to let go of some things and just start saying, or you come to the place where you're like, I can't do this anymore. I need your folks. And this goes back to ministry leaders, right? About having them step in and help in the ministry too. But then you have so I'm just going to start thinking about this.
Mm-hmm.
In my situation, I am fortunate. I have a ministry team of people that help do a lot. In fact, they're fantastic. But I know a few pastors I work with. They're in a smaller church situation.
Yeah.
What would you say to them? Like, what can they do to try to help when they don't have a lot of that extra help?
Yeah. Again, a good question. I think we have to recognize that we all have our limits. So even in that setting that you're describing, if we don't have that much assistance, then we have to maybe be more aware of the scope of what we can actually do and how we're going to do it. And maybe we cultivate leaders if there's that opportunity. But I think even in that question, there's sort of this implied understanding that maybe, people in that church might have that, well, we don't have those resources, so you're going to have to do this. And I would say, I've pointed ministry leaders to, instances in the New Testament where Jesus himself during his ministry, takes a break, needs to get away from the people or whatever. And I've described that to ministry leaders to have them actually say to me, well, I'm like, wait a second. No. We're talking about Jesus, the Son of God. Like he needed some time away. How are we going to say that that's not necessary for us? So I would say even in those instances, we've got to have a plan. We've got to recognize that that is something that is, if we're not managing that, it's just a matter of time. And in fact, if we're not managing it, it's probably going to become a factor sooner rather than later.
Right. And so what are the, let's just talk about this real quick. So I've seen people in ministry go through different levels of burnout, or I've seen them get to different places I don't want to say self-harming, but they're harming themselves because they're not taking care of themselves, mm-hmm. right? So what have you seen, or what can, I guess I'm kind of wondering about what are some things that they need to be looking for? Like we talked about warning signs, but what is it that could happen?
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess my first thoughts would be, how's your relationship with your family, particularly your wife? You ask pastors' wives, how's your husband doing? And they'll tell you, they will, because they see this, they get it, they understand it. So that would be an indicator. Is this person putting even their ministry, I was going to say ahead of their family, and that makes it sound like, and in some cases this could be the case, the family takes a back seat to the ministry. It's not always a pride issue. I don't care about my family. That can be a factor at some points, but I think it's largely, again, just out of this desire to want to be a part of other people's recovery or helping other people. So relationships would be part of it. I would say if we begin to see, pastors in more intense situations feeling like there's things that they've got to develop on the side to kind of keep themselves going. And that could be, pornography use starting to bubble up. It could be alcohol use starting to bubble up or increasing. It could be, we've seen some stories of gambling and some of these things. So they're, or even just being, disconnected and feeling maybe quicker to sort of engage in conflict. It's just these indicators of things that we're burned out. We're, running on fumes. And so our reaction, our ways of finding ways to cope, we're just going with something that has maybe a very low barrier of entry that's immediately available to us that in the end is just not very good for us.
Yeah, I think that's good. I appreciate hearing that. I was thinking about I was thinking about this from a perspective of being a pastor. And I was thinking about what are some of the things that I deal with on a daily basis, or people that I talk to, or issues or needs. And even today I had 5 different text messages from different people about, some were just simple, not a big deal. But then there was a couple that were, a little bit more like, hey, I'm really need help with this, or I can't pay for this right now. Is there any way the church can help me? Or, that I'm not going to get into it, but that thing we talked about, I'm just going to be very general. That thing we talked about a week ago. Well, I'm afraid it might be happening or it's coming
Yeah.
true, you know? And so here I am, I'm kind of filtering through all these. That's just text messages, right? But then I have people who want to come by and see me and talk to me and say, "Hey, can I get some time? I need to talk. I got questions." Some of those things that people want to talk to me about are about family. They might even be about, like, they're worried about a child. Some of them, though, are even people who come to me in the church. And this is the one I want to go to, is they have concerns about the way things are in the ministry of the church.
Yeah.
Right. Because now it's not about them. It now crouches onto my doorstep of, maybe this is about me.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, did I do something wrong? Did
Mhm.
I cause a problem? Was it something I said, or was it because I didn't do the program right? They're not happy about it.
Yeah.
So what do you say to the pastor who's dealing with, how do I filter these things? How do I work through them? You know?
Yeah. Well, I think the word filter is a good word. Different kinds of those situations, we should have a general, compass for how we're going to navigate those things, or a filter. Yeah. So in the case that someone has, views or things that they want to see the church do or not do or whatever, do we have sort of like a quarterly, meeting where people get together and kind of talk about that? And so then in the moment when it happens, we say, hey, that's a great suggestion, or that's probably worth us discussing. Here's the forum for that. Let's go and do that. As opposed to, you getting a text at, 8:00 on a Friday night or something like that.
Worst time.
Yeah. Or, hey, I have office hours available for pastoral counseling. So someone wants to just come in and talk about a relationship. There's a designated time and spot for that. And outside of that, if it's that intense, if it's that I need to talk to you right away, then maybe the pastor isn't the best, resource for that in that moment, because they can't be available 24/7 necessarily. A lot of churches will have sort of an on-call pastor, but as you pointed out, some churches don't have that availability to sort of take turns with that. The on-call pastor is the pastor, right?
Yeah.
So we go into each of those situations that you describe and you say, what makes sense as far as how we can support this person and what their need is? Because I would be willing to bet if we went back over 6 months of these kinds of texts or emails or drop-ins, we could start to put these buckets in place, and we could say, okay, here's a pretty big category. Here's another big category. And so as opposed to sort of reinventing the wheel and feeling like I've got to manage this now, drop everything. Hey, let's have a different way of sort of managing each of these things, still being responsive to the person who is in need, but also respecting the fact that the pastor might not be available or, have these other responsibilities. And so we might need somebody else to step up or take the lead or refer out or,
right.
Right.
So I'm going to ask the question because I know you proposed it before to me on we did some pre-work on this. I think, and I know it's true because I've witnessed it in a friend of mine, that this can all lead to depression.
Yeah.
And some serious depression. And I'll bring it up. I've never known anybody to do this, but I've heard of pastors who've gone to the place where they've just taken their life because they just, like, I can't do this anymore. I can't deal with it. And they're just done.
Yeah.
So how can we start looking for, like, indicators for depression too? Like, obviously we talk about indicators that kind of get you there, right?
Yeah.
But there's a place where it's got to be like, boom, you hit something, you hit a wall, right?
Yeah.
So what are some of those things you look for if you start, I don't know, if you're looking for signs of depression?
Yeah. Well, so I would look at it as sort of a continuum, in the sense that you have someone who had a rough day, they come home from work and they need some time and space, or they need to go sit outside by the fire pit, or, whatever it is that they need. And then you have situations where that's kind of more the norm. And so that person might be sort of more irritable. Men, in terms of depression, tend to demonstrate more the irritability and the anger versus the sadness. So sometimes in our minds, we're looking for that classic, just someone walking around, sobbing all the time. And, that can be a factor, but isn't necessarily what we're looking for. And so I think it's just looking for somebody who is really struggling to find pleasure in everyday activities. It's someone who, may just be more withdrawn. They're not reaching out. They just don't seem like they're firing on all cylinders in terms of wanting, to be involved in their responsibilities and those kinds of things. As we move towards the continuum, sometimes the thought of somebody who actually wants to engage in self-harm or is having those thoughts, again, we think we can catch that because we're looking for this person who's maybe not getting out of bed every day. But, a lot of times, and I would say even within the pastoral ministry, there's sort of these two dynamics. On one side, there's the smiling face and everything's great, nothing to see here. There's this facade. And then behind the scenes, there's, again, maybe these struggles. So I would say it starts really with having that personal connection with someone in this role and saying, hey, how are you doing? And just listening. A lot of times people in ministry don't have those people. It's more about what can you do for us as opposed to, hey, I get that you're in a role that's really challenging. Like, let me just listen. So I would say we really need to just be quick to kind of hear that person, to connect with them. Because other than that, we might not know what's going on. They might not feel free or safe to be open and honest about it. People who are in professional ministry, it's like, if I tell somebody that I'm really struggling, like, am I going to be out of a job? And I have seen that and heard of those kinds of cases where pastors don't feel free to open that up. And so that's part of what potentially we start to get further into this continuum where, they don't, a pastoral minister might not feel like I can be honest about how I'm feeling because there's no support for that. That's not what people want to hear. And then they feel stuck, and then maybe things start to escalate from there.
Yeah. One of the things that I can say that's been really good for me is I'm part of, we call it a leadership learning community.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a group of pastors in our denomination. We get together every month. But actually, as we're doing this right now, I'm seeing text messages on my screen from that pastors group. And because we do connect, I think it's one of the reasons for me personally that I feel like I can continue or I can be sustained is because I have these friends who understand what I'm going through. So I would even share, and I'll add something to this, and I'm going to go back to that pastor who might be alone in that smaller church. You need to find community. You need to find somebody in your community who might be another pastor or a ministry leader. It could be a nonprofit leader, but somebody that can kind of connect with you, that you could just meet with like 2 or 3 people monthly, that they can ask those questions. How are you doing? How can we help you? Yeah. Because as you know, that makes a huge difference. Yeah. Right. So I think it's a battle.
And maybe the questions are even a little less broad as far as like, how are you doing? It's more like, tell me where you're struggling. Yeah. Or tell me some things that are really frustrating you. Because I think the instinct is to say like, there's a lot going on, but I'm all right. Yeah. Because, everybody's in this. Everybody feels this, right? Yeah. So who am I to say in my, role that I'm overwhelmed because I'm not doing what, and it's all relative. But I think the point that you're making, which is really good, is, nothing really is improved by isolation. We need to feel that sense of connectedness. And when we do feel that isolation, that's again where we start to often see some really not great things start to bubble up.
Yeah. And I'm totally with you on that. And I also, I know a few of my friends lately have been also taking some sabbaticals or taking some time off. They've asked their church kind of take a little bit extra time just to breathe a little bit. That's healthy. I mean, and I think any church could give that to somebody, large or small church, right? Just to say, if you, and I want to encourage those that are watching this to say, don't feel like you can't go and ask and just say, I need that little extra time. because that does give you like, it can be refreshing, right? Now, if you're like me, I go away for like 2 weeks. By the end of the second week, I'm like, I can't stand this. I got to get back,
Yeah.
you know? So I don't know. I'm sure you've probably seen evidence of like taking breaks is probably a good thing.
Well, I said earlier about a plan, and I think I'm a
Yeah.
big proponent of what can we do throughout the course of our day that's maybe a 5 or 10 minute thing a couple times during the day that just help us to relax. It could be just go stand outside and take deep breaths or stretch for 5 minutes. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it can really help. And then, a couple nights a week or a couple times a week, what are we doing to kind of relax? Maybe it's, something physical. Maybe it's, breakfast with a friend or these kinds of things. And then periodically, a few times a year, we have these instances where maybe we can go away for a long weekend or things like that. And then maybe every once in a while, we are going away for a few weeks. So again, we tend to think sort of like all or nothing as far as like, okay, and sabbaticals are great. I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's a fantastic thing that a church could do for its pastors. But, to have that plan in place, but then also encourage, like, you know what, take the afternoon off because I know you've worked. X, Y, and Z. I've heard churches where they, or I've had pastors talk to me about their expectations of like, I have to be in the office because this is what this expectation is. And then it's a day where there's really nothing happening. Meanwhile, they've worked, Sunday late into the day. And it's like, there should be some flexibility there. If we can give this person that leeway to go off and connect with their family or read or whatever it is, let's encourage them to do that.
Yeah.
So in some instances, let's not even wait for them to ask. Let's say, hey, you would really benefit from this.
Right. Yeah. And I would even add, and I think pastors, if you're watching this, between prepping for giving a message on a Sunday morning, if you're being real about it, I mean, I know some people like to just kind of go, I can do this, they'll wing it. But some of us, like me, I don't wing it. I mean, and if you watch them or if you've seen them, I put a lot of time and effort into like even the visuals, like, because I want to have good clarity about what the message I'm trying to bring.
Yeah.
Well, that can take, that could take a good 8 to 10 hours. And that's even after just doing some more reading and some research. Then you put it together 8 to 10 hours, and then you're preaching. And I don't think people, maybe they do, and I'm just saying this, but I don't think people fully understand, like, when you go up there and you're extending yourself for like 30 plus minutes, it can be exhausting.
Yeah.
Especially after you might have taught a Sunday school class and then you preach and then you do this, So I'm always sharing that because I want to commiserate with my fellow pastors to know that it's a lot. And then if you do it week in and week out and and you're all alone.
Yeah.
And you don't have nobody else helping you, it can be hard.
It's interesting. There's this dynamic where most people who are at church or interacting with pastors or things like that, they're not at work. They work during the week or whatever. And so then they're there. And so I think in the minds of sometimes the congregation, it's sort of like, oh, we're hanging out. And pastors are there because they love people and they want to be there.
Yeah.
But I've had pastors tell me, I can't, people are just stopping by all day because they think that what I'm doing is kind of like hanging out and not even real work.
Yeah.
And as you just, barely scratch the surface of what a day in the life of a pastor is. I mean, there's so much to be done. And so now you add into this a desire to want to be connected to people and say hi and how you doing. But then, there's this long list of things that have to get done. And I think, again, we're back to sort of this conflict of I want to be present with people, but I also have a job description with responsibilities, and there's not so much of us to go around.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we've kind of really hit on the idea of being, what can happen, what can take place, or what is the indicators of burnout and all that too. And I just want to encourage the folks that are watching this, that you can, if you want, if you're especially in the southeast area of near like Philadelphia, you can check them out at Lime Tree Counseling in Ambler, Pennsylvania, and be awesome to have you connect. And I'm hoping to actually have Nate be a part of something we're going to do in the fall here to talk about counseling and how to help people in your church as well, which is actually the topic of our next segment. So, but for now, we're going to shut off here and we'll come back in a little bit. Thank you for watching. Appreciate it, and appreciate your time too as well. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Absolutely.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.